Hello and welcome back Techies. I am Sambhav here. This is the first part of matrix in our analytics. And please don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon to get the latest update on my upcoming videos. So in today's session, we are going to talk about matrix. In the previous video, we have already discussed about vectors and we have done a lot of examples about vectors. So if you have not checked out my previous videos, please don't forget to check them out. So in today's session, let's start with matrix. So in today's session, we are going to talk about what is matrix, how can we create matrix in R, and what is how to assign names to the matrix, and how to access the information about the matrix. Once the matrix is created, how can we actually access those information? And we will also do a lot of examples, practical examples to understand the concept of matrix. So let's get started. I hope you're already very much clear about what matrix is. Matrix is nothing but it is used to store a similar type of values in multi-dimensional array. So when we have discussed about vector, you might have noticed that we have created, let's say for example, vector 1, and we have assigned values like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. And we mentioned two important points about the vectors. The first was that it is a non-dimensional, that means it has got no dimension, and it stores a similar type of value, that means it should be either numeric or character or logical. Now, the difference between the vector and the matrix is that the matrix is a multi-dimensional array. As I have mentioned here, it is a multi-dimensional array, whereas vector was a non-dimensional array. Similarity between vector and matrix is that vector stores similar type of data, whereas matrix also is used to store similar type of values. So here when we talk about multi-dimensional array, it means that we are arranging the values in rows and columns. Let's say for example, if I'm talking about a matrix, if I want to create a matrix out of these values, it means I can create 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see it has got multiple dimension. It means that when I'm saying multiple dimension, it means that it had got rows. So you see it has got 2 rows and 2 columns. Now it is pretty easy for us to create a matrix. We have to use a function called as matrix. As you can see the syntax here. We will give a matrix name and we will use the function matrix. Then we should have a vectorized value, and then we will have to decide the matrix is going to have how many rows and how many columns. That means we will have to decide the number of rows and number of columns. Now let's look at this particular matrix where I have created M1, that is the name of the matrix. I have used the function matrix, and 0 and 3 comma 3. Now here I have not used any vector. 0 is a single value. When you're using a single value, what R will do is it will actually vectorize this value. Vectorize the value means, see, it will actually vectorize the value. That means it will create the same element, that means same 0, it will create according to the dimension. Dimension here is number of rows and columns. So there are 3 rows and 3 columns. It means that this matrix will actually look like 0, 0, 0. There are 3 columns and 3 rows. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So this is your matrix, right? This is your matrix. So it will have 3 rows and 3 columns, and the value 0 is actually vectorized because of the matrix function. Let us go ahead and create this matrix. So this is my R Studio, which you're very much familiar with. So let's say M1, and I'm going to use the function matrix, and then I'm going to specify 0, which will be vectorized according to the number of rows, which is 3, and number of columns, which is again 3. Let me execute this piece of code and show you the result. So yes, as you can see that I have got a matrix which has got 3 rows and 3 columns, and the elements are 0, 0, 0. So here the 0 is actually vectorized. Now let me give you another example. Let's say M2, and I'm writing matrix, and now I'm creating a vector which has got 3 elements, 1, 2, 3, and now I'm specifying 3 rows and 3 columns, 3 comma 3, right? But it has got only 3 elements, 1 2 3. So you're aware of this concept. This is nothing but I've created a vector using a combine function, right, which I've already discussed in my previous video. Now there are 3 elements and there are 3 rows and 3 columns. Now how is R going to solve this, or how is R going to place these 3 elements in a matrix of 3 by 3? Let's see that. So as I told you, R will actually vectorize this. It means that in the previous case we had 0, so R has vectorized 0 to get a 3 by 3 matrix. Similarly here, R will actually vectorize 1, 2 and 3 to get a 3 by 3 matrix. So now if I execute this and show you the result, you see it is 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, because 3 by 3 means 3 rows and 3 columns means 9 elements of the matrix. So 1 2 3 will be actually vectorized to satisfy the condition, which is 3 rows and 3 columns, right? What if I want 2 rows and 3 columns? 2 by 3 means 2 comma. So the first value in the syntax, I hope you remember, the first value was number of rows and the second value was number of column. Please remember this order. The first value decides the number of rows and second value decides the number of column. Now what will happen if I execute this code and show you the result? So now you see it will create 2 rows, which is 1 2, and 3 columns, which is 1 2 3. So again 1 2 3 is actually vectorized according to the dimensions specified here, right? That is how the matrix can be created. Now I have given 2 examples here. Let's create a 3 by 3 matrix using numbers from 1 to 9. Now guys, I will try to create this matrix in 2 different ways, right? Let me show you what I'm trying to say. So in order to solve the first problem, what we'll do is we'll solve it in 2 different steps. Step number one, first we will create a vector from 1 to 9. So what we will do is, let's say I'm creating a vector called as vec1, and I will use a colon method. 1 is to 9. So using this command, my vector will be ready. Now in the second step, in step number 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this vector in my matrix. So let's say I'm giving the name here as matrix 1, mat1, and use the function matrix, and now I am going to call this vector, which is vec1, in the matrix, and then I will decide, and then I'll define the rows and column, which is 3 by 3, 3 comma 3, right? So let's do the same thing here in the practical. So we will have vec1, and then I will create the vector 1 is to 9. Let's check out the result, vec1. So we have got 1 2 3 4 5 up to 9. Now I'm going to create the matrix out of it. So mat1 is equal to matrix of vector 1. I'm going to call that vector, which I have already created earlier, and then I'm going to define 3 rows and 3 columns. So mat1, it will give you the result 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. So this is how we can create this particular vector. Now second question is create a matrix of even numbers from 1 to 20. Now this question I'm going to solve in a single line. In the first example I have done it in 2 different steps, but this one I'm going to do it in a single step. Now what I'm going to do here is I'll show you. So let's say solving the second question. So let's give the matrix name as mat2, right? And then we'll use the function matrix. Now we have to have numbers, even numbers from 1 to 20. So in the previous video when we were talking about vectors, we have seen how to create a vectors from 1 to 20. So for that we will be using a sequence function. The start value would be, from value would be 2, the end value would be 20, and the by value would be 2. So if you're not aware of this, please go ahead and check out my previous video. You will find it. And then we will have to define the dimension, the rows and column. So we know that from 2 to 20 for even numbers there will be 10 elements. So you can give 5 rows and 2 columns, or 2 rows and 5 columns, whatever you feel comfortable with. So let's go ahead and do it. Mat2 matrix of sequence from 2 comma 20 comma 2, and then I'll give 5 comma 2. So mat2. So we'll get the result 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So if you want, you can change the dimension as well. So you can have 2 rows and 5 columns. So we will have only 2 rows, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and the last column would be 18, 20. So that is how we will get the result. Now this is how we can create the matrix. Now guys, you might have noticed that whenever we are creating the matrix, by default R will fill the value for the column first. Let's say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Then it goes to the next column, which we have specified, column 2. So next column, which is 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Right? That means the default option for R while creating the matrix is it will fill the value for the column wise. First column, second column, third column, fourth column, and so on and so forth. Now what if I want to fill the values in the matrix by row? That means first row first, second row, third row, fourth row, and fifth row. That means this matrix should be like 2, 4, 6, 8. That means I'm filling the value for the row first. That can be easily done by using an option by row is equal to true. That means when you use option by row is equal to true, R will actually fill the value of the matrix by row, not by column. It means that the default option of by row is false. So create the matrix of even numbers, the same question, filled by row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify another matrix name. Let's say for example mat3, and then I will specify by row is equal to true, or let me give another name. Let's say for example even matrix, and the same concept, sequence 2 comma 20 comma 2, and this time I am specifying the same thing. Let's say 5 comma 2, and now I will specify by row is equal to true. Make sure the T must be in uppercase. It is a logical value. Now if I execute this piece of code, you will notice here that now R is filling the value by row. If you compare this two matrix, you see here it was filling by column 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, which was the default option. But now it is filling the value by row, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and so on and so forth. Right? Now, the second question is create a matrix of 5 by 2 dimensions. That means 5 rows and 2 columns. Guys, always remember the first value defines the rows and second value defines the column of odd numbers from 10 to 30 filled by row. So what we are going to do is let's give another name, odd, and then matrix of sequence. The question is from 10 to 30 and odd numbers. So the odd numbers actually start from 11. So my start value will be 11 and the end value would be 30, and we have to specify the by statement, that is incremented by 2, then only we are going to get the odd numbers. And then now we will have to create we will have to define the dimension, that is number of rows and columns. So we know that here we will have 10 elements. So let's create this time 2 rows and 5 columns. And since we have to fill the value by row, so I'll use the option by row is equal to true. Now let's execute this and see the result. So now you see we are getting the result and the matrix value is filled by row. Correct? So I hope it is clear what is by row is equal to 3 options. Great. Now, talking about assigning the names to the matrix. Now, what do we mean by assigning names to the matrix? First of all, let us understand what does it mean. Assume that I have been given a matrix such that, let's say for example, I have given a matrix such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9, right? Now matrix name is different. Let's say for example this matrix name is mat1. Now I'm saying assigning the names to the matrix means we are actually assigning the names to the row. Let's say for example for this first row I want to give the name as R1. Second row I want to give the name as R2, and for the third row I want to assign the name as R3. Similarly, I can also assign names for the column. So let's say for this we can assign the name as column 1. For the second column I want to assign the name as column 2, and for the third column I want to assign the name as column 3. So this is called as assigning the names to the matrix. That means assigning names to the rows and columns. Now let us understand how can we do it. I have specified the syntax here. So in order to I'll explain you the syntax, which is pretty easy. Now in order to assign the names, we are basically assigning names to rows and columns, which is nothing but the dimension of the matrix. So we are adding names to the dimension of the matrix. So we will use the function called as dim names. Dim names stands for dimension names. So we are going to give a dimension names to the matrix, right? Now how are we going to do that? I'm sorry, this is wrong. Let me erase. Oh sorry, I'm not able to erase it. Okay, let's strike it off. No wastage of time in erasing. So let's do it once again. So let's say dim names, so the dimension names of the matrix, right? Dim uses dimension and names. Now here you will have to specify the matrix name. So whatever matrix you have given here, so let's say mat underscore name, whatever matrix name you have assigned. So let's say for example in this case the name of the matrix is mat1. This is the name of the matrix, right? Then I have to assign names for the rows and the names for the column. So let me define names for rows first. So I want to give the name as row. So I will give R1, that is my first name, character value. So I'll have to specify in quotes R2, right? And R3, correct? So I have assigned the names for the rows. Now I hope you remember the syntax. In the syntax we have said that first we are defining the row value and then the column value. I hope you remember in the syntax of matrix I told you very strictly that the first value is the row value and the second value is the column value. So I have defined the name for the rows. Now since there are multiple values, we will have to use a combine function. Then only it will be combined. So this is your row 1, row 2, row 3, which is the name of these 3 rows. Similarly, we will also have to assign names to the 3 columns. So again I will use a combine function and I will give the name as column 1, comma, column 2, comma, and column 3, right? Double quotes because they are character values. So I have already defined the names for my rows and my names for the column. Now these two values need to be concatenated. That means they have to be combined together. We can combine them by using the list function. I will talk about list later. That is a separate section altogether. So inside the list, let's say, let me specify with this so it will be clear. So this is a list, this is a bracket for list. Inside the list, the first element is the row, and then I'll separate it with a comma, and again I'll combine this. So see guys, this is a list function. List function has got 2 elements, one the name of the rows and another the name of the columns, right? I will talk about this also now. So I hope this portion is clear to you, how we are assigning the names to it. right? Now let's say, let me do this for you. So I have already created a matrix from 1 to 9. I hope you remember. Let's check it out, which was 1 is to 9. So you see matrix 1. Matrix 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's try to assign the name to this particular matrix, right? This is my matrix 1. So what I'll do, I will use dim names, and then I'll specify the matrix name, which is mat1, and then I will use the list function, and inside the list, the first name I'm going to assign it for the row. So I have given a combine function, and I will give the name as, let's say, r1, r2, and r3. Now I will also have to assign the names for the columns. So I'll combine, and then I'll specify the name as column 1, comma, column 2, comma, column 3. Right? Now let's execute this piece of code. And now when I see mat1, you see the names of the dimension, that is rows and columns, has been assigned. Right? The names of rows and columns has been assigned. Now assume that, now guys, assume that you have a matrix which has got let's say 10 rows and 10 columns. Now assigning the names using the combine function may really become very painful, because there will be a lot of typing work required, right? There will be a lot of typing work required. So what we will do here is, just let me pull this up. So what we will do here is, oh sorry, red is a too bright color for us, and pen color, let it be white. Now what we are going to do here is, let's see, right? Now in those situations we will be using, a different command. That means the function remains the same, which is nothing but your dim names. Let me write down the matrix here so that it will be easy for you to understand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, let's say 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. A little bigger matrix, right? Now I want to give the name here as row 1, row 2, row 3, right? And then the names here as column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, and column 5. Now guys, using the previous, we can do this using the previous method, but there'll be too much of typing work. So let's assume that the matrix name is mat2, right? Now what I'm going to do is, in the dim names, I'll specify the matrix name, which is mat2, right? Now we know that we have to use the list function. Now first I have to assign the name of the rows. Let's assume that I am assigning the name of the rows as simple the same method called combine function, and then I can give row 1, row 2, and row 3, correct? Row 3, and let me close this bracket, and there's a comma over here. Now for the columns, now again column, if I use the combine function, it will become really difficult because a lot of typing has to be done. So what we will do is, we can use the paste 0 function. Now paste 0 function is actually used to concatenate elements, two or more elements. So what are we going to paste here? Now see, what we will do is, we will actually break the name into two parts. One is the column part, which is your call, which is a fixed part. So I will specify here as call, and then this column has to be pasted with the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That means we can create a vector out of it. So 1 is to 5, right? And then we can close it. So how does this work? How will it work? So what it will do is, what R will do is, it will take the column and it will paste it with the first element, which is 1. Again it will take column and it will paste it with the second element, which is column 2. Again it will take the column value and paste it with the third element, and the name will become column 3, so on and so forth. So let's take this example. Let's solve this problem in a matrix. So let's say I'm creating another matrix called as mat2, and here we are going to have elements ranging from 1 to 15. So let's create this matrix, and then 1 is to 15, and we had 3 rows and 5 column, So let's see whether our matrix has got created or not. So we got the matrix created. Now let's assign the names to the dimension. So we will use dim names, and then we will specify the matrix name mat2, and here you can specify the list, which is the function list operator. Now we will have to specify the names for the columns. So let me use the combine function itself. Not too much of typing. Actually you can use paste 0 here also. It's itself. If you want, you can use paste 0 here also, but let me use row 1 comma row 2 comma row 3. Right now I have to specify the name for the columns, but I'm going to use paste 0 function. Paste paste 0, guys, it is paste 0, not paste O, right? And now I'm going to specify call, because that is going to be repeated, and it has to be pasted with 1 is to 5. Oh sorry, not 15, 1 is to 5. Now let's execute this piece of code and see whether we have got our desired result. Guys, please remember, R is strictly case sensitive, right? So as you can see here that I have got the result, right? Now guys, once a matrix is created, there are lots of functions available in R which will actually help you to find the information about it. For example, let's say let's talk about the matrix 2. So if I want to find the number of rows, how many rows it has got, so we will use the function n row, number of row for which particular matrix, mat2. So it will give you that it has got 3 rows. Suppose if you want to find the number of columns, you can use n call. So and matrix 2, so it will tell you that it has got 5 columns. And if you want to find the number of rows and columns in same command, you actually have to use the dim. Dim stands for dimension. So you're saying what is the dimension of matrix 2? It will say it is 3 by 2, that means 3 rows and 5 columns, correct? You can also find the names of these rows and columns. Let's say for example you want to know what is the name of this particular matrix or something, you can give row names, right? Make sure that it is names, it is not names, right? Let's say mat1, so it will tell you that the names are r1, r2, r3, or let's say for mat2, which is row 1, row 2, row 3. Similarly, call names of mat2, so it is column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4 and column 5. Similarly, if you want to know the names of both rows and columns in the same command, you will use dimensional names, dim names, right, of mat2, right? So if you execute this, it will give you that these are rows and these are the column names. I have specified here. So n row returns the number of rows, n col returns the number of columns, and dim returns the number of rows and columns. I hope you have enjoyed learning from this session, guys. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. And please don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon. So I hope you have actually learned what a matrix is, how to create the matrix, and how to assign names to the dimensions of the matrix, that is rows and columns. Thank you very much for your time and patience. You have a wonderful day ahead.